So before we begin, I just want to acknowledge that we're meeting on the traditional, ancestral, unceded territories of the First Nations and Native American peoples. Here where I am in Vancouver, those peoples are the Musqueam, Tsleil-Waututh, and Squamish nations. But I know where many of you are, you're on the land of other nations. Always, but especially during this difficult time, let us remember our connection to our sisters and brothers in these nations and pray for the day in which we might be with them in right relationship. So welcome. Let me turn it over to Harold. Thank you so much.
Thank you so much, Kathy. You're reminding me the next time I revise this course on women mystics, I'm going to research buffalo calf woman and maybe have an indigenous mystic as part of the series or some other person. Anyway, I love looking at these particular 10 women. They're, so well balanced in that they're from many different traditions and different time periods. I'm just reminding you about the I-we distinction. That's another way they're very balanced, it seems to me. Hi, Dorothy, and hi, Sally, welcome. Yeah, I'm just reminding people about the sequence of the women we're studying. Srimala and Hypatia were both sort of I-we mystics. It looked like an equal emphasis on interior and looking outward. Rabi'a was a very profound I mystic, but she managed to do a lot of help to people in her community. Hildegard is really turning outward, you'll see. And, so we call her a cosmologist, an eco-theologian, a lot of and she's very modern, and which is surprising. She's, even though she's about 800 years ago, she sounds like she was for today, and she was only rediscovered maybe 30 years ago. Okay, and after today, we're going to look at 3 strong I mystics in a row. When we look at Julian of Norwich and Mirabai and Teresa of Avila, 3 very strong I mystics, and then we'll look at several we mystics near the end of the course. So looking in the 19th and 20th century, it seemed like there was a turn outward. Although, there's always a little bit of balance in all of these outlooks and these women. Okay, a very strange thing happened to me when I was studying Hildegard. I found myself getting angry that she was hidden for 800 years. In other words, like when I was going through seminary, I would have loved to have been studying her theology. Her theology is magnificent. It's beautifully written. It's very creatively described, and it's very cosmic or outward looking, including all creatures. And she was a musician. She even invented some kind of a musical instrument like a harpsichord. Here's a strange thing about her. If you study several different fields, you might come across Hildegard. For example, if you look at the history of holistic health, you'll probably be looking a little bit at Hildegard. If you study the history of music or literature or morality plays, you'll come across Hildegard. If you look at deep theological or deep ecological thinking, study the roots of that in say, the Western world, you'll come across Hildegard. You see what I'm getting at? There's a lot of fields. If you study social protest literature, you'll probably come across Hildegard because she wrote very powerful letters to popes and kings. And we have these letters. So, and that's another thing. We have so much about what she did. She had 4 biographers. And the strange thing is, about maybe 10 years after she passed away in 1179. So way back in the Middle Ages, she passed away. She disappeared from history, even though all her works were contained, in libraries. They were hidden. And you have to ask, in case you are in doubt about whether there's patriarchy operating in the world, I think this is very, very strong evidence to that effect. Okay, so why did we discover her again? In in the late 1970s, there was a lady named Judy Chicago. Some of you may have heard of her, a great artist who did a work called The Dinner Party. What a creative idea. She invited 39 women from history, all going way, way back, 39 women. That means a triangle-shaped dinner party table with 13 women at each side of the table. Can you see how creative that would be? And then she did research on each of these women, and she set a place for these women. So one of these women was Hildegard. And so people say, oh, so a lot of people from that work, the dinner party, a lot of people learned about some great women in history. Another source was Matthew Fox. He's a creation-centered theologian, Christian, very liberal or radical in his outlook. And he discovered something that he called the earth-centered spiritual tradition in Christianity and in other faiths too. And so he unearthed Hildegard, and so he translated some of her works. And so there was an explosion. And then her music got discovered in Europe. So it's kind of easy to buy her tapes. And here's another strange thing. She wrote in German, and the type of early German that she was writing in is considered kind of klutzy in terms of its use in poetry or in, say, lyrics for songs. But somehow, she made that kind of German beautiful. So she's also what we would call a polymath. And usually that word is for men, unfortunately. It usually means someone that's well-informed in all the major fields in their day. In other words, you can hardly talk about anything in their day without mentioning them as having expertise. So Hildegard was a polymath. Okay, I'm just going to look down the first page, which tries to introduce this woman. And we'll give everyone a chance to share. But I want to ask you right now, how many of you know about Hildegard? You heard about Hildegard before this particular? Just put your hand up if you knew of her before this course. Mm-hmm. Okay, so that's more than some of these other women, I think. Although maybe Julian of Norwich, she's coming into her own too. We'll look at her next time. November 10th, I think we look at her. Okay, so I'm looking at the first page, sort of a bio. One of the most gifted spiritual leaders who ever lived, though she was lost to history for nearly 800 years. See, this is a very important fact about this woman. We can call her an abbess, the leader of a women's convent, a mystical theologian, a reformer, an ethicist, a naturalist, a healer, a visionary, a director of painting. What a strange title. She directed people to paint her visions. We don't know if she painted them herself. It doesn't seem like she did. It seems like she had intimate connection with some artists, both men and women, and completely directed their work. Musical composer, playwright, and preacher, would you believe? Here's another thing. She was a reformer about 300 years earlier than the Reformation. She had ideas for, liberating the Roman Catholic Church. Had people listened to her a little more widely, I think, the Reformation would have been moved up a couple of hundred years. Okay. And social critic, that's another category. So you see, there's a lot of different categories of her expertise. Age 18, she became a nun. 20 years later, she became an abbess, that is the leader of the convent. Age 42, she started to have spiritual visions again. She had had them as a child. She started to have them again. And this time, they were recorded and illustrated. Now, that's almost like saying recorded. She wrote books about them, right? So all of her theology is pretty much based on these visions. She describes many different aspects of these visions. Okay, there's something I want to show you. Kathy, can you show people that picture? That my sister is an artist, and she painted something for a painting class. Yeah, you see, what she was asked to do is copy another painting. So she copied this painting of Hildegard and added a few current details. For example, if you look over to the left, you'll see things like causes and cures, Civius, or Know the Way. These are her books. These are her major writings over there. Okay, and in English. So this tells you this is a modernized version of a painting that was trying to imitate medieval style painting. Okay, and there's Hildegard, and there's her written works, and there's some unusual iconography and symbolism. We'll talk about that later. Okay, let's go back to the group, if we could, Kathy. Yeah, here we are. So just going back to the bibliography, like she's the youngest of 10 children. The youngest of 10 children, would you believe her parents gave her to the church as a tithe? Can you imagine giving your child to the church? Instead of money, you're giving one of your kids who's supposed to be serving the church, and she did masterfully. She sometimes described herself as weak, ignorant, unschooled. And this is really perplexing. She did this more than once. She would describe herself with those words, weak, ignorant, and unschooled. And to us, she looks powerful and educated and very strong. So, one explanation is that she did this to persuade others that her work couldn't have come only from her. It had to have been due to the glory of God. And this technique, Julian did it too. It could be that women who were trying to get attention, in the Middle Ages, which is not easy to do, felt like they had to say this, right? Or who knows? We'll speculate on that. All right, I'm going down. And she was investigated, and she wanted to be investigated. She wondered whether her illuminations should be publicly written about. Would that be of service to the church? She wondered. So the Pope sends the best theologian of the day, Bernard of Clairvaux, to investigate. And Bernard of Clairvaux was, the expression I've used in this course is behind every great woman is a good man. So I would say behind this great woman of Hildegard was Bernard of Clairvaux. He investigated and said, yeah, not only are these not crazy, these are a major contribution to the theological understanding of the church. That was his, result of looking at Hildegard's work. So I list her first book called Know the Ways, which is a very sophisticated theological work. At age 50, first of all, she lived 80 years. You know the average age of someone in her day? Somewhere between 35 and 45 is about that's the length, the expected lifespan in those days. She almost died several times, but she managed to live to 81 and to be quite productive almost every inch of the way. I put at age 50, she's already by this time, getting famous in her own lifetime. She founded a new monastery at age 53. She was a very good friend of a woman named Ricardus. There's a movie about Hildegard. In fact, there's more than one. And they always bring up this relationship between her and Ricardus. It almost sounds a little codependent, to use modern language. Like she kind of wanted Ricardus to be a little bit more, depend on her. Ricardus started to grow on her own and wanted to become an abbess on her own, and did. And that upset Hildegard. So that was a sort of a sign of, you might say, emotional dependency, a little sign of Hildegard's personality. She wrote Natural History, which is what we would call nature observation, very detailed observations about what happens in a forest, the relationship between trees and the soil and the plant life and the animal life. You remember last time we looked at Rabi'a, she didn't want to go outside. So here we have the opposite, an outward or we-oriented mystic, right? Really loving the creation and seeing the hand of God in it and in its intricacy. And her observations sound almost scientific. She's trying to be quite precise about what she observes. In her 60s, this is quite old. Imagine in your 60s saying, I think I'm going to go on a preaching tour. And she goes on preaching tours throughout the Rhineland of Germany. And why? She had a very interesting reason. She said, the people don't know enough about the Bible. They don't know enough about the riches of the Christian heritage. I'm going to try to teach them. I'm going to try to inspire people, especially poor people, to learn to read. I'm going to try to challenge the church to share its wealth of wisdom with the people. Oh my goodness. Her reform initiatives, I referred to halfway down the first page. To me, this is very interesting. She had a kind of almost a modern view of how the church and state should be complementary. That is, each of them have their sphere, their legitimate sphere of influence, and they should work together, right? She sometimes thought that the church was going too far in controlling the state. She sometimes thought that the state was going too far, in controlling the church. During her time, there was something going on called the Investiture Controversy. And I don't want to tell you too much about this, except that this was a power struggle between church and state about who gets to invest bishops with their official role. And that had a lot of political implications. She basically was saying that the church was hoarding its knowledge and it should share it a little more deliberately with the people. She thought the state had responsibility to improve education as well and lift up the poor, build better libraries and better schools and that sort of thing. Wow, all this sounds incredibly modern, and we have to pinch ourselves and remind ourselves this lady was 800 years ago. Oh my goodness. Okay, in her 60s, she wrote Life's Merits and Rewards, which is a sophisticated ethical doctrine and virtue theory. I'm fascinated with virtues because virtues are those moral spiritual principles you find in all religious traditions and all spiritual traditions. She was on to that and described that, and her morality plays personified the virtues. Sometimes she would have a virtue played as an angel, and sometimes it would be a person, right? Amazing. In both genders. Oh, believe it or not, she wrote about relationships between men and women. She did enough counseling with men and women to know about sexuality and its importance and have things to say about it. Again, this is way, way ahead of her time. And there's almost an embarrassment of riches in terms of what we know about this woman and her work. Okay, at age 67, she founded another monastery. That's a lot of work, incidentally. In her 70s, she warned King Frederick Barbarossa. He was one of the Holy Roman Emperors. This was like a major player in history, and she was not afraid to tell him when he was wrong in dealing with the Pope. She wasn't afraid to tell popes when they were wrong in dealing with the king or with bishops or with other, the royalty. Okay, right near when she died, I got to tell you, there was a woman who was considered possessed or crazy that was given to her convent, and she did something that would be called establishing a therapeutic community. Again, this is incredibly modern. You can heal someone by giving them an environment, a social environment that's therapeutic, where you expect them to do their part, expect them to do their work, you expect them to answer your questions, right? So she basically turned her convent into a therapeutic community. That's pretty amazing, because people thought this was actually a miracle, that this woman could be healed in 4 or 5 weeks due to Hildegard's influence. Right near the end, she was interdicted, which means sanctioned by the church, because she did something she wasn't supposed to do, namely provided music at a memorial service, at a funeral, for someone that was not so good, or believed to be not so good. You see, again, Hildegard was full of creativity and wanted to bring, you could say, liturgical creativity to everything that she did. She wrote some songs, and the lyrics of them sound so wonderful you can hardly believe it. You'd be ready to sing it right now. And they are singing her songs in churches, especially in Europe. Okay, at the bottom, I try to summarize very briefly some of her major theological points of view, distinctive teachings. The Holy Spirit kindles the hearts of humankind, resurrects and awakens everything that is. You could call hers a theology of the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit is a force of wisdom. It's a force of creativity built into the whole creation, operating with all beings, all creatures. Divinity, she says, is aimed at humanity. Some of her lines sound like bumper stickers almost. They sound so profound, and they mean so much in just a few words. Divinity is aimed at humanity. The web of the universe supports us. Doesn't that sound rather modern and ecological? The web of the universe supports us. The life-giving greenness of God's hand holds us. The creative greenness of the Spirit nourishes earth. If you highlighted every time she used the word green, here's what I'm holding up, a book of her meditations. What color is it? Green. And do you see the vision on the front? That's one of her visions, which I have to come back to. I'm going to come back to the visions in a second, but let's finish her theology here, or the summary of the theology. 5 virtues most especially will help humanity build the heavenly city of the future. Constancy or perseverance, heavenly desire or aspiration, compunction of the heart or having a strong conscience, harmony and peace, and contempt for corruption in the world or righteous indignation. Wow, she says, so a lot of virtues are important, but she picked out these 5 as essential to build heavenly cities on earth. My goodness. She says, all creatures are sparks from the radiation of God's brilliance. All creatures. Meet every creature with grace. These are her words. We are co-creators with God. I love the brevity of her language sometimes. It's like you can grasp it. She almost writes like an early journalist. I'm giving you, powerful message in a short, understandable way. God destroys uselessness. Humankind is meant to be the banner of divinity. So she puts human beings in a very high station. We're sort of somewhere between, nature, all of nature on one hand, and the divine realms above. We're sort of right in between, which is a sort of a Renaissance idea. Again, she's 3 or 4 centuries ahead of the rest of Europe. So you see, I get angry when I think, I didn't know about this woman when I was going to seminary. When I was taking religious studies, I would really like to have known about her, right? So the world did not know about her. Only a few scholars in the Benedictine tradition knew about her. And then suddenly, because of Judy Chicago and Matthew Fox, the world rediscovers Hildegard only like 30 years ago. Wow. Okay. I got to show you, can you see this? You're looking at that? Okay. You see, this is one of her visions, and we have 25 of these things. So she has a vision, and then she gets an artist and has them, depict it. And she goes into every detail with them, right? She shaped what the artist was doing. So this is showing her illumination. Do you see the illumination coming down into her? I got to read to you a tiny bit about these illuminations. She says things like, I'm trying to figure out what part of it, she goes on and on and on about these visions. And she's basically saying, these visions came to me with my eyes open. Okay, so in other words, she was seeing them with her inner eyes, right? And then sometimes she would hear things too, and that was with her inner ears. She says, let me just read some of her own descriptions. She said, the light which I see is not confined to one place, but is far, far brighter than a cloud which carries the sun. Nor can I gauge its height or length or breadth. It is known to me by the name, the reflection of the living light. So that phrase, the reflection of the living light, permeates her writing. She said, this is what was revealing something to me, the living light. Okay. And then she says, when my soul experiences the sight of these things, I am transformed into another character. I consign to oblivion all sadness and distress. What I see and hear in this same vision, my soul drinks as though from a spring, but the spring remains full and undepleted. So she's trying to describe to her what it's like in very clear language, something very hard to describe. This is, and so 25 of these visions are actually, here's another one. This is, can you see this? See, this must be the favorite one of the 25 because it shows up on her book of theology. There it is again. This is called the Book of Divine Works. Here it is again on another book about Hildegard, same vision, right? And here it is on this one that I showed you before on her meditation. So Carl Jung, would say, oh, we have a mandala, right? A lot of them have a mandala format, but they're very unusual. Sometimes they have 4 quadrants. Sometimes she'll put things in the 4 quadrants like animals or forces of nature, other kinds of different kinds of flowers. Okay, here's another field. Let's say you're studying the history of Western art. What people notice is her iconography, her symbolism is entirely different than the other symbolism that was going on at her time, right? So she seems to have some kind of a futuristic vision. They almost look like something made more recently.
You have an example of that, Harold?
An example of what?
Well, an example of something that she has interpreted, a symbol that's her interpretation is more modern of.
I can show you something that's on my screen. It's a depiction of the cosmic egg of the universe
do that, please.
By the flames of God's love from one of Hildegard's books on her visions. Okay. And I can hold it up if you can see what this looks like. I mean, this looks amazing to me. I mean, it does look very modern and it does look very symbolic and it does look like something that you would use for contemplative practice.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
Hey. Here's an example. You see, this is called the cosmic tree. And it's not just one tree, is it? You see, it's like a tree going into all the quadrants, right? So that's very different. In other words, there's sort of a holism, some kind of a holism operating in her way of thinking. And then she puts different circles, sometimes a circle outside of a circle, implying divine God, the creator at the top, and then wisdom, which to her is the Holy Spirit, which is feminine. And we're going to look at that on page 3. If you've looked ahead at these notes, you'll see how, for her, wisdom is the Holy Spirit. It's also feminine. It also ties up with what's called wisdom literature in, say, Proverbs 8 is a wonderful example of the work of wisdom as a female complementary force to the Creator. Oh my goodness. So she really ran with that one. She felt it. She could see it, both in the physical world and in the spiritual realm as well. So I'm no expert on iconography. See, but I know that if someone knew all about the details of medieval art, they would say, oh, Hildegard is unique. It's symbolism that looks like she's a couple of hundred years ahead of everybody else for some reason. Here's another thing.
In the chat, I just put a link to a site that seems to have a bunch of her visions. So if folks want to look at
you can see maybe 25 of them, I'm sure. I got to read you one more piece of her description. She says, in my visions, my soul, just as God willed, climbs in my visions through the changes of atmosphere to the top of the firmament and spreads itself out amongst different peoples, although they are a long way away from me in distant regions and places. She sounds like she's rising above the earth and getting a wider and wider in order to think this way, we have to live in the space age. You and I are used to this because, rockets go up there and they take photos. And we can picture this because of photos. She's describing this as this is part of what happens to her. She goes up and she goes out. So it's going up and out in her awareness. And like seeing the whole of humanity, seeing the whole of the earth, looking at the earth as part of something even larger. So that's why it's called a cosmological theology or ecological theology, or creation-centered theology. Yes, Jennifer, please.
Well, I keep thinking too how, like, I just found this one. It's just so intricate, and it's also that everything is round. And at that time, I don't think they thought of the world as round, did they? That didn't come about until way centuries later. So even the fact that, even this, like now in our minds, we do have this view of the world being round and people living on either end of the circle, but for her to always have that theme is really interesting. It's
as if she actually saw the earth.
Yes.
Right? And it's, I go up in some of these visions, Okay. I quickly want to show you page 2 and page 3. I'm not going to try to read everything. I'm eager to hear some of your reactions. On pages 4 and 5, I picked out 13 really amazing pieces, and we'll look at some of those, not all of them, but I think we should hear her language. Some of the language she uses she's talking about God in the first person. So this is like revelatory. Here's a hypothesis. Let's say these things had been written in the first 200 years of the Christian era. Then there might be something called the Book of Hildegard in the New Testament. You see what I'm saying? Some of it sounds revelatory, and she's claiming it is a revelation. I'm not saying this on my own. These words are flowing through me. These images are flowing through me from above. I'm just trying to be an honest reporter. Okay, quickly on page 2. Well, let me just stop here. Let's stop. Let's hear some initial reactions to what you've heard so far, and then that'll tell me whether we need to look at which paragraphs we need to read, and maybe we can skip a lot and go right to her own writing at the end, which is kind of what I'd like to do. So any reactions to what you're hearing or what you read and what you understand about this woman?
Well, besides being such a theological, brilliant woman, she was also a healer and like a pharmacist. And she, I read this long article, and there's a picture here of some health cookies that she made. It all sounds so new age, but this is a picture, and they actually sell these at some, place at the moment, and the recipe's available. And but it's a healing cookie that she had, and the ingredients are here, and they're called Cookies of Joy, and it's from Physica. Is that one of her publications?
I haven't heard of that one.
It says, take some nutmeg, and this is quote within quotes, take some nutmeg and an equal weight of cinnamon and a bit of cloves and pulverize them. Then make small cakes with this and flour and water. Eat them often. It will calm all bitterness of the heart and mind. Open your heart and impaired senses and make your mind cheerful. It purifies your senses and diminishes all harmful humors in you. It gives good liquid to your blood and makes you strong. And so these cookies.
You're reminding me of something. I taught this course at UBC in continuing studies. There was a woman in the course who said, what, Hildegard? She said she had just come from another course on the history of holistic health. And so she knew stuff like you just read. She was just learning about that through the book, Causes and Cures. That's her book that has a lot of this. So you just shared something like, so in that field, holistic health, you might come across Hildegard. The history of music, you might come across her as having invented something, that's a little bit like a harpsichord before there was a harpsichord. On and on.
It says here, in Germany, some doctors still practice Hildegardian medicine. In the town of Ellenbach, for example, a clinic focuses exclusively on Hildegardian treatments.
See, I would guess that they didn't know where it came from until recently, as the world rediscovered her. They said, oh, that was from Hildegard. We thought this was medical wisdom passed down. Other reactions? Any reactions so far to what you understand about Hildegard? Kathy or Susan or?
He sounds so different than Rabi'a. Like Rabi'a spoke of like such emotion, right? She was like so heart-centered and talked about God being her beloved, and and Hildegard is so much more intellectual, it seems.
Yes, or outer directed. I hear what you're saying. Yeah, it may be more abstract, but let's look at some of her language. It's very poetic. It's very warm. She has God kiss creation. How's that for intimacy? We're going to read that. Her words, right? Ooh. Okay, Kathy, any reactions?
Yeah, no, she's just amazing. I hear about her from time to time at seminary, especially when we were studying Sally McFaig.
Oh, yes, the body of God and other, Sally.
Right, and like a sort of eco-Christianity. So I hear about her in that context, but I didn't know any of these other things. It's just so fascinating and so amazing to me that she could be 800 years ahead of her time. I can't imagine. So I'm just really blown away. It's amazing.
What makes me sort of angry is how many other gems have there been in the female species that we were not able to receive, right? Or cultivate or develop because of patriarchy. In case there's any doubt that there's patriarchy, she is living proof, right, of it. That much bounty for humanity was covered up. Why? It threatened people, right? She's a woman. I don't know. Any other reactions?
I could say, I think I was surprised that she's so green. She's an environmentalist before her time. She knew how the world, how nature worked together, how everything relies on each other. And it makes you realize how far wrong we've gone, how far we've gone off the path that caring, greed has taken over how we should treat the earth. And directly I started reading about it, I thought, wow, she just knows how the earth should be treated. And It's quite amazing. I'm really
Creation-centered spirituality.
Yeah.
Mm.
Wonderful.
Maybe we should give her a couple of Nobel Prizes retroactively or something.
I think so.
Any other reactions, other angles on her that anyone wants to share at this point? Okay, I want to show you a few things on pages 2 and
I think
3.
Bev maybe has something. Is that right?
Who?
Oh,
Sorry.
you're on mute right now.
Yeah.
Bev.
I was just struck on Hildegard's mystical theology, just in the first paragraph, that we will better understand what we should do in order to fulfill the divine plan, to express the fullness and goodness of our own nature. That is just so current. That is just so now. That's,
I can't believe you honed in on that. Can you read that whole paragraph? It's not that long, but that to me summarizes again her theology and its purpose, right? Its purpose. Can you read that first paragraph?
Sure.
She's on page 2.
Yeah. Hildegard is concerned with the whole of creation and the place of humanity within that whole. She thus creates a cosmology, yet her instincts are primarily pastoral, attempting to represent the world such as we will better understand what we should do in order to fulfill the divine plan and to express the fullness and goodness of our own nature. She explores the primal drama of God, humanity, and the Redeemer.
So I have to admit, I'm attracted to this feature of her. Her mind and heart soar, like they go up and out and try to include everything and find the place where everything belongs. Where does the stream belong? Where does the animals and plants, where do they belong? Later on, she talks about justice too. What kind of a society is just? How do you lift up the poor? How do you educate people? I think she would be a fascinating figure in the history of education, because it looks to me like she was interested in what you could call holistic education, or bringing a right brain angle on it, and facilitating artwork, for example, or paying attention to imagery that people have in their dreams or in their daily reverie, right? What is that teaching us? She was very concerned about that. She thought that the church was not paying any attention to these things. A voice crying in the wilderness. Okay. Anyone else willing to read? There's a couple of little paragraphs on page 2 I'd like us to look at. Anyway, Sally, willing to read?
Or if you just unmute, Sally.
Well, sorry, I
froze just as I asked you. Oh, there you are. Sally, since you liked her greenness, can you read the third paragraph from the bottom?
The third, 1, 2, 3. Yeah.
The soul.
Yeah. The soul is the green life force of the flesh. For indeed, the body grows and progresses on account of the soul, just as the earth becomes fruitful through moisture. We are meant to nurture and harmonize with creation. Sinful means not in harmony with the world around us. Redeemed humanity is to take the place of the fallen angels before the throne of God. But this could not take place without the saving action of Christ. Though we and the creation are essentially good, the measure of our sinfulness is the measure of our distortion of that essential goodness.
So bad is, the distortion of our good. It's a positive way of looking at sin, it seems to me. Yeah. Quite amazing. Can you keep going? The next paragraph is so related.
Down or up? Down.
Down, yeah. Hildegard links.
Okay. Hildegard links rain and moisture with the Holy Spirit, the giver of life. Through the word, the sweet moisture of holiness fell from God and in the Holy Spirit. The Holy Spirit poured out the green freshness of life into the hearts of men and women so that they might bear good fruit. The church spreads like bursting buds and blessed greenness. Christ is the green wood because he caused all the greening power of the virtues.
You see how green comes up everywhere?
Yeah.
this is a different metaphor. You know, where did she live? She lived in a forest. Rhineland, right? Beautiful forest land. And then the last paragraph, can you read that one, Sally? Or
Yeah.
not Sally. Yeah, continue.
Oh, okay. God has arranged all things in the world in
Sally,
consideration of everything else. Creation blooms and flourishes when it remains in right relationship and keeps to its assigned tasks. Creation is to serve humankind in its bodily needs and to be for the health of the soul as well.
You know, if Hildegard lived today, she would probably want to give a talk.
Yeah.
That's going on right now. I could imagine her giving a little talk, you know, with the G20.
Yeah. Yeah.
Okay. Look, third page. I might have gotten carried away with something. I want to explain what I did here on the third page. It looks, very fascinating with wisdom literature, and some of the wisdom literature in the Hebrew scriptures makes wisdom with a capital W identical to the Holy Spirit and female. Woo! So this was an exciting discovery in feminist theology, say 30 years ago, 40 years ago, in seminaries. Anyway, okay, so Proverbs 8, I just want to, I'm going to read you the bottom 2/3 of that piece I gave you on Proverbs 8. So it's in italics in the middle of the third page. This is wisdom talking in the first person. She says, "The Lord created me at the beginning of his work, the first of his acts of old. Ages ago, I was set up at the first, before the beginning of the earth. When God established the heavens, I was there. When he drew a circle on the face of the deep, when he made firm the skies above, when he established the fountains of the deep, so that waters might not transgress his command, when he marked out the foundations of the earth, then I was beside him like a master worker. And I was daily his delight, rejoicing before him always, rejoicing in his inhabited world, and delighting in the sons of men. Happy are those who listen to me, watching daily at my gates, waiting beside my doors. For those who find me find life and obtain favor from the Lord." So it looks to me like a lot of Hildegard's writing is like an amplification of this feminine wisdom literature that you find in some of the Psalms and some of the other books. There are about 15 books that didn't make it into the Bible that are in the Roman Catholic Bible. They got knocked out of the Protestant Bible. Some of them have a lot of this wisdom literature, where wisdom is a feminine power that's higher than the human level, and the first creation of God, which then co-created everything else, right? All the planets, we might say, or all the living beings, including human beings. Okay, she really runs with this stuff. Now, remember I told you Judy Chicago, the artist, so she wrote something, and I've given you it at the bottom. And the reason I put it there is that it sounds exactly like Hildegard. So my theory is Judy Chicago discovered Hildegard, right, and really embraced the view. And this is a beautiful poem. I want two people to read it. One of them the first line and someone the second line. So how about Kathy and Linda? Would you be willing to go back and forth and read Judy Chicago's piece
Okay.
at the bottom?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay.
It's talking about the future too, which is Hildegard's totally concerned with the future. What are we evolving into, right? This is an image of the future. Okay, Kathy first, and then Linda, and back and forth.
"And then all that has divided us will merge.
And then compassion will be wedded to power.
And then softness will come to a world that is harsh and unkind.
And then both men and women will be gentle.
And then both women and men will be strong.
And then no person will be subject to another's will.
And then all will be rich and free and varied.
And then the greed of some will give way to the needs of many.
And then all will share equally in the earth's abundance.
And then all will care for the sick and the weak and the old.
And then all will nourish the young.
And then all will cherish life's creatures.
And then all will live in harmony with each other and the earth.
And then everywhere will be called Eden once again.
As far as I'm concerned, this is inspired literature, right? This is beautiful, and it's totally in keeping with the theology of Hildegard. So I should call Judy Chicago on the phone and see if she's still alive and say, did you get most of this imagery from Hildegard? This is my question for her. It seems to me like, and she did a lot of homework for the dinner party, right? Research those women and including Hildegard. Okay, look at page 4 and 5. These are, some other readings. I'll tell you where I got a lot of them right here. You see this book? If you buy only one book on Hildegard, this might be it, right? Because these are selections of some of her most intriguing, I think, utterances about the creation and our place in it, right? Okay, so a lot of this came from there. Yeah, I think all of it, right? But this was looking at a lot of her works. This one, this is the big magnum opus, the Book of Divine Works. Look how fat that book is. See, that's her systematic theology, right? And then some of the other ones are, her holistic health, you might say, her ethics, her virtue ethics. Okay.
So Harold, how would that have been different from the church's primary teachings or viewpoints at the time? How was she, because I'm not really familiar with what the church's main theology would have been at the time. How was she a bit divergent?
You see, okay, here's a theory of history. I believe the church was very tied up with politics. There was a power struggle between church and state. Also, this thing called the Crusades? There was a power struggle with Muslims too going on. Right? Bernard of Clairvaux, I like him in many ways, but he's sort of implicated. He was stirring up the need for a crusade, right? What am I trying to say? So the church was tied up with, you could say, who's going to control Europe? Who's going to control Europe? And how do we regain in the Holy Land? It was stolen to us, from Muslims who, from a Christian point of view, are infidels. You might say, on the other hand, Muslims are calling Christians infidels. And so for 200 years, there's all these wars going on. I don't know if I'm answering your question. But there were other great thinkers. Thomas Aquinas was about, 70 years after Hildegard. And at first they thought he was a heretic too. And then they took a better look and said, not only you're not a heretic, you're a saint. Thomas Aquinas also, I think he was influenced by Hildegard because there's a lot of creation-centered spirituality in him, more than people realize. Okay, Matthew Fox points that out. In fact, Matthew Fox is a shortcut to a lot of this. He likes to compare two paradigms: the paradigm of original blessing versus the paradigm of original sin.
Yeah.
Okay, so from his point of view, original sin won the theological struggle. There was more emphasis on sin than on original blessing. But that someone like Hildegard was on the side of original blessing and describes the original blessing of creation. Oh, my wife just whispered to me, your question was, why did the church want her to shut up? Is that what your question is? Is that behind it?
That would probably be the next step in this. Yeah.
She's empathizing with you better than me. Yeah. So she's a threat to the theological paradigm.
Mhm.
And then, okay, she's a woman, and she's dealing with things that were low priority, like the health and education of the poor, uplifting the poor. How about acquiring wealth? This is what, heads of state were trying to do. This is also, the church was competing with the state for socioeconomic power and political power. So she was out of sync with all that, and could have, like redirected and rebalanced the ship of the church. Had she been widely listened to. Let's say that she was part of the curriculum in seminaries. But let's say a whole lot of women got empowered by her work because they heard of it, right? And let's say even secular schools started to integrate her stuff. Oh, I mean, the world would be better off, I have no doubt. Any other observations about things we're looking at? Let's read some of her words, okay? Oh yeah, please, Jennifer.
Oh, I was just going to say too, it's like, in a way, her ideas are they're so right for this period of time, but in a way they're so modern and so ancient, because a lot of the Celtic beliefs and the more pagan beliefs were so tied into the earth, and it's almost like we went through a period in history where we lost that. There was still some people who were that way, but it became very disentangled with that. So she brings sort of like this modern view, but also this ancient view all at the same time.
Thank you for pointing it out. It's also an ancient view, isn't it? Yeah. Like she goes up and sees the past as well as the future, it seems to me, like both. Like she even says that. She says, she was saying, when I looked at the Psalms, for example, I was understanding what they meant, what they went a long time ago, what they mean now, what they will mean in the future. She was saying that was revealed to me. Wow. Okay. Any other reactions? Okay, we got a half an hour. Let's look at some of these things. I got to show you some. Oh, before we do that, here's some of her singing, right? Or rather, her composition. I just want to read to you the words of one of her songs. Okay, short. Creator God, draw compassion from us. Christ, draw compassion from us. Spirit God, draw compassion from us. So this is one of her, I hate to use the word Gregorian chant. It's a Hildegardian chant. And those are the words. Here's another one, a little longer hymn. O moving force of wisdom, capital W, encircling the wheel of the cosmos, encompassing all that is, all that has life, in one vast circle. You have three wings. The first unfurls aloft in the highest heights. The second dips its way, dripping sweat on the earth. Over, under, and through all things whirls the third. Praise to you, O wisdom, worthy of praise. So this is a medieval hymn. It sounds a little different than what we got from Luther. or you see what I'm saying? I mean, it even sounds Buddhist to me a little bit, Okay, wisdom and compassion are pretty important virtues from the Buddhist perspective. Okay, look at page 4 and 5. I'm going to show you the first 6 quotes. She's using she's using I language, but the I is not her. I is God, right? So she's saying, God made me say this to you. Wow. Okay, who can I pick on to read? Linda, can you read the first short one? Then Kathy,
Okay.
the second one? Yeah.
Okay. A wheel was shown to me. A wheel was shown to me, wonderful to behold. Divinity is, in its omniscience and omnipotence, like a wheel, a circle, a whole that can neither be understood, nor divided, nor begun, nor ended.
Here we go with circular stuff, circular imagery again.
Mm-hmm.
You know the word shone, that's S-H-O-N-E.
Mm-hmm.
Right? She's saying a wheel was illumined for me.
Mm-hmm.
That's what shone means. It shone. It was radiant with light. I thought it was a typo, right? And then I checked it out very carefully. Okay, Kathy, can you read the second one there? Yeah.
Sure. God says, I am the day unto myself, not formed by the sun, but rather forming the sun, igniting it. I am the understanding, not understood, but rather allowing all understanding, illuminating it. I have a voice of thunder, living sound, the movement of all creatures, everlasting life of life. I am without beginning, without end, God. I am perpetually stirring and standing, always at work. It is easier to gaze into the sun than into the face of my mystery. Such is my beauty and radiance.
Wow.
So she's talking God language, like it's an amazing thing. Revelatory language. It's at least it's revelatory with a small r, or maybe inspirational with a capital I. Don't know quite how to evaluate it. Any reactions so far? Anyone else willing to read?
I can read.
Okay, please, Jennifer. Yeah, the third one.
I'm sorry, or did you want to read? I just saw somebody else put up their hand.
I
Sure,
can
you go first and I'll go next. Go
Yeah,
ahead.
Susan next. Okay, but Jennifer first on the third one down.
God says, I am the supreme fire, not deadly, but rather enkindling every spark of life. I am life, complete unto itself, whole sound, not needing stones to be sculpted, not needing branches to blossom, not rooted in human potency. Rather, all life has its root in me. Understanding is the root. The resounding word blossoms forth from it.
So this is theology and poetry combined, right? Okay, my goodness.
Wow.
All right, Susan, can you do the fourth one then? It says, I, the fiery life of divine wisdom.
I, the fiery life of divine wisdom, ignite the beauty of the plains. I sparkle the waters. I burn in the sun and the moon and the stars. With wisdom, I order all rightly. Above all, I determine truth. I am the one whose praise echoes on high. I adorn the earth. I am the breeze that nurtures all things green. I encourage blossoms to flourish with ripening fruits. I am led by spirit to feed the purest streams. I am the rain coming from the dew that causes the grasses to laugh with the joy of life.
You know, I hate to be theological, but so God, the creator and wisdom, the helpmate of God, are working together, right? So this is a pronounced feature of a lot of things she's writing about. But she's adding poetry and she's adding observation, right? She's spent a lot of time looking at nature and the creation. Anyone else willing to read? There's two more of these sort of revelatory type things. Okay, Bev, please. Oh, you got to unmute, Bev.
I call forth tears, the aroma of holy work. I am yearning for good. I govern the light of the skies. I govern the trees, grasses, and all other earthly greenings. I order the wild creatures. I order all creeping and crawling things over and under the earth. Who would dare find fault with my methods?
And keep going, would you? They go together, the next one.
In doing good, the illumination of a good conscience is like the light of the earthly sun. If they do not see me in that light, how can they see me in the dark of their hearts? With my mouth, I kiss my own chosen creation. I uniquely, lovingly embrace every image I have made out of earth's clay. With a fiery spirit, I transform it into a body to serve all the world.
Wow.
Well, I think she caught up a little bit with Rabi'a.
And those are, direct references to Genesis,
Yes,
the terminology.
I hear echoes throughout the whole Old Testament,
Mhm, mhm.
She was saying, at one point I was reading her, she said, it's hard to understand the Bible, but after my illuminations, I understand parts I never understood before.
Mm.
And she said, it's clear to me what they're referring to. And then she expounds on it,
Mhm.
lots of theology. Okay, any reactions to these first six are a different quality, it seems to me, than a lot of her writing. She's sort of like she's being a mouthpiece for maybe wisdom with the capital W, right? Or the divine, God and wisdom working. And what are they saying? What do they see? What are they trying to show us? What do they want us to awaken to? Please, Paulina.
Paulina, yes. I am struck by, in number 5, the line, I call forth tears, the aroma of holy work, because I really identify with that on a very personal level, because when I've had my illuminations and there's something that I'm personally channeling, I cry, I just weep, I can't help it.
Absolutely, I know what you mean. Yeah.
Yes, it's so powerful. And so when I read that, I said, oh my God, this is a fellow spirit. This is somebody who, it's as if she's right next to me. So I'm so glad that I managed to make it to.
There's a little piece of theology called the theology of vocation or calling. And I think this is a powerful version of that, right? The tears. Oh my goodness. When you're doing good work, that is very healing and inspiring, right? Yeah, you're never happier than that. Wow. Okay. Now, let's look at the last page. You see, she's phasing over into some of her ethical consciousness, right? So she's not just doing theology or ecology. She's also concerned with virtues and ethics as well, and work and being fruitful and not wasting time. Stuff like that, right? This is starting to come in. Okay, look at, we're on the last page. Okay, who else is willing to read? Anyone else willing to read? Please. Oh, Kathy again. Okay, can you read what I call number 11, which is the third one from the bottom on the last page? Now it came to pass. Yeah.
Now it came to pass that man lacked a helpmate that was his equal. God created this helpmate in the form of a woman, a mirror image of all that was latent in the male sex. In this way, man and woman are so intimately related that one is the work of the other. Man cannot be called man without woman. Neither can woman be named woman without man.
In some of her holistic health stuff, she talks all about men and women's bodies, the complementarity of the bodies too, and their natures. And oh my goodness, but so this seems like way ahead of its time. Maybe this alone kept her, made her work hushed up. it would have been like
someone reading her and hearing this and saying, oh, this isn't divine. Like this, we got to put this away. Clearly this didn't come from God. Like, it's so brilliant, and I just can't imagine listening to it and not.
Violates the hierarchy, right? And the patriarchy.
I know, man, so powerful.
Okay. Who else wants to read? Anyone? Paulina, please. Can you read the next one? God be praised.
God be praised for his handiwork.
Oh, you froze.
And so humankind, full of all creative possibilities, is God's work. Humankind alone is called to assist God. Humankind is called to co-create.
Oh my goodness.
Yeah. Wow.
What a high calling human beings have. Isn't that utterly amazing?
No wonder she was buried for 800 years. So threatening.
the
To a
point that we're
power,
at,
to a power mind.
yes, right now in time, what we're looking at, because I have lots of people in my life who send me really frightening things to read because we're still in the pandemic. There are things that are happening that it's clear we're kind of mushrooms that are being kept in the dark and fed a lot of garbage. But one of the negative visions for what could be possibly happening that unfortunately seems like writing on the wall is that humans are being moved into this role of an anti-human, of a techno-human, and that really, I think more than anything else, I think that frightens me more than the idea that we're being wiped out. Okay, we're going to be wiped out, big deal. But the idea that we could be transformed from co-creators with our creator into something that is an android, that's what really gives me the chills.
Okay, in other words, it's not mechanistic. It's very organic what she's talking about, right? Very organic. It's a different model. It's also, I don't know, I wish science had really paid attention to her too, right? It's very, there's something called process theology that you come across, the idea, and to me, it's very consistent with indigenous insights. Everything is a process. All the levels of reality are interactive and co-creative. I love that word, co-creative, how useful that is for so many different things. The complementarity of working together, right? Opposites are needed. Different capacities are needed. I'm thinking of Jung's psychology too, the Myers-Briggs differences, they're interdependent. They're helpful. They shouldn't be seen as competitive. So she had a very different outlook. The world was not ready for her 800 years ago. But now it seems like, everyone's ready for this point of view. She would be a multi-billionaire if she could collect, from all her songs being sold and her books being sold in Europe, especially. Oh my goodness. She would probably want all that money put to use to educate the world, uplift the poor, right? And make everyone, give everyone a chance to find their calling, their way of contributing to creation. I love her theology. So I was very angry to find out I had been completely deprived of it in seminary. It would have changed seminary. It would have changed the world had this been known a lot earlier. I'm very, very certain of that. Okay, any other reactions so far? Sue, welcome aboard. Good to see you. Okay, Sue.
I had a different Zoom meeting, so
you're
there
busy. You're busy, but read that last one.
You know what, Harold? I can't because I didn't copy
you don't
out
have
your.
That's okay. All right. Who else wants to read? We'll read a few more. Jennifer, can you read the last one at the bottom? Then we'll go back and look at some of the other ones we didn't look at.
And that's number 13?
Yeah, 13. You numbered them. Okay.
When a person understands justice, the self is let go. Those who are just love God. The first seed of the longing for justice blows through the soul like the wind. The taste for goodwill plays in the soul like a breeze. The consummation of this seed is greening in the soul, like that of the ripening world. Now the soul honors God by the doing of just deeds. The soul is only as strong as its works. God gave to humankind the talent to create with all the world.
I can't tell you how much I like all that.
Me too. Yeah.
Well, that's amazing ethics. She combines aesthetics and ethics, the beauty of doing good, right? That permeates her way of thinking, it seems to me.
Well, Harold, like there's contemplative people that pray and meditate, but also there's a Baha'i prayer or writing that says, strive that your actions day by day may be beautiful prayers.
Beautiful prayers.
And yeah, there's a song to that effect. It's called Strive. and it's like heal the sick, help the oppressed. There's about 5 things that we're supposed to do, but it all involves action. So, it's like talking's fine, but action shows that you really mean what you're going to do, right?
Excellent point. In other words, virtues are not sort of, the virtue, like in her plays, she made virtues characters, right? And she shows what they did and the type of advice they gave and and what they inspired other figures to do. So virtues are not abstractions, they're powers and forces, right? That we can cultivate. Yeah, I'm utterly amazed by this stuff. It would have improved philosophy too, right? Too much philosophy is very abstract. I think she's sort of concretizing the use of high ideals, showing they are to work in the world. They are to cultivate the world. Okay, any other reactions so far? We're running out of day. Yeah, please, Jennifer.
I was thinking that even though her ideas were put to rest for so many years, I read a book on her ages ago, which sort of said during her lifetime, she was so charismatic and so willing to talk to authority that she actually did have quite a following. And so it almost seems like in her lifetime, people couldn't ignore her, but then after, as time passed, they shut her away. It's almost like they did realize the power of her theology.
Again,
she's a major player in the 1100s in Europe. Yeah. Absolutely a big player. And then boom, we don't hear about her after that. That's strange. That's so strange. Yeah.
But Sue, again, the fact that she's a woman, like back then, women didn't have a whole lot of power. And then, as you say, your course on women mystics, like these women were dynamos in their time, and you just doesn't that just blow you away? And I'm sure it's like the female monarchs, Queen Elizabeth I, and Queen Victoria, which is still more modern, but they were in times where women didn't have that much power, and yet when they came into power, they were amazing.
Sue, in the early part of this class today, she did something very politically astute, I think. Like, you remember the visions? I told everyone about these visions she had, and she writes a letter to the Pope and says, Pope Eugenius, can you send someone to investigate whether these should be shared publicly? You realize how politically astute that is? So the best theologian in Europe is sent to talk to her, and he's impressed, right? So, you should really describe those visions, write out all that theology. We want to hear it. We want to hear it. So then, see, after that, everyone's interested in her letters too. The civic leaders want to hear from her, and as well as the church hierarchy. So the amount of letters she wrote is incredibly voluminous. So these 4 biographers that she had, they have all these letters. So this is like a gold mine for us to learn today. The impact women could have had, had it started earlier, right? Okay. Any other observations? Who's been trying to say something, didn't get a chance? One of my interests has always been education. I see her philosophy of education, so to speak, is incredible. So everyone should learn to read, right? Everyone should have the chance to be artistic. Everyone should have a chance to observe nature. Everyone should have a chance to act in plays. Oh, that's another thing. This morality play she wrote, first one ever in world history. As far as we know, that's the first morality play that was acted out. And it was also a musical. So she combined yet another art form to put her music in there. See, we don't even think, no one thought this way about putting the arts together, in a package, the way she seemed to have done. Okay. All right, I want to pick up on, who else is willing to read? We have, we have 8 minutes left, 8 minutes. Okay, we can read the ones we didn't read. Dorothy, you willing to read? Anyone? Oh, Paulina, can you read the one that says humanity finds itself in the midst of the world? It's on the second one down on the last page. Oh, you're muted, Paulina. You're muted. Oh, Paulina, you're muted. Kathy, help us.
I was so happy to find it on my phone that I forgot to unmute.
Okay.
Humanity finds itself in the midst of the world. In the midst of all other creatures, humanity is the most significant and yet the most dependent upon the others. Humanity is small in stature, but powerful in strength of soul, with head directed upward, with feet on firm ground. Humanity can set all things in motion, things above, as well as things below. Wow.
You know that when you have a sin-oriented theology puts human nature down, right? It emphasizes our frailty. She emphasizes our power, right? That's another way it's opposite. That may be the biggest reason they had to shut her up. How are people going to be good unless they feel like there's a threat of hellfire for them? And she's making it sound like human beings are too good. There's nothing to worry about. Oh, anyway, that might be part of the explanation for the cover-up. Okay, keep reading. Paulina, you willing to look at the next one too?
Number 9.
Yeah. You're muted, Paulina. What happened?
I thought I unmuted, but I muted. I have to say the one before though, number 8, it reminds me of the very famous Marianne Williamson about we fear our power. You know that, I mean, one of the most famous poems. That's what we're afraid of. So that number 8 of Hildegard, spot on with, right? This contemporary poet. So number 9, the human person is the form and fullness of creation. In humankind, God brings to fullness his creation. God created humankind so that we might cultivate the earthly and thereby create the heavenly. Humankind should be the banner of divinity. Divinity is aimed at humanity. Wow.
You know, in classical theology, there's things like the doctrine of the church, the doctrine of God, the doctrine of Christ. They didn't have a doctrine of man, you know, or humankind. It was more like a doctrine of sin, or how are we saved, or what should we be afraid of in order to be saved. But she's got a full-blown doctrine of humanity. Like what is the human being from a divine perspective? She's really developing that. Fantastic. You know, there was a field, I was a philosophy minor. There's a field called philosophical anthropology. In other words, it's a philosophy about human nature. What are we like most essentially? She is making enormous contributions, you know, in that field, looking at human nature from a ecological perspective, from a cosmological perspective. Okay.
Well, it's
one
like,
more. And then,
Harold, it's like, are we physical beings with a soul, or are we actually spirits that start out in the physical being? So I think we're actually spirits that happen to start our spiritual journey in a physical body. There's a Baha'i English professor, John Hatcher, who writes a book about that. So,
you know, Sue and I are Baha'is. I see a lot of, you know, theology that it fits with many teachings in the Baha'i faith, but I see it as fitting with a lot of the sort of enlightened teachings that are spread out everywhere. She's a universal woman. Okay, Kathy, can you read the last one, number 10? It would be the middle of page 5, and then we'll wind up.
And then I'll read it. I was just going to say, isn't this so interesting? Because she's encouraging us to pay attention to creation more and kind of be in harmony with creation. But she's also saying the humans are better. than maybe the church at the time was saying.
Higher capacity, not
Right. But versus
Yeah.
The church and kind of the Western mindset at that time said humans were worse, but also that humans had to control Earth. So isn't that like kind of
I hear what you're saying. Yeah.
Kathy, it makes me think, if I can jump in, it makes me think of the question about, because I'm Jewish, about chosenness. That is chosenness a privilege or is it a responsibility? And it's the same
second
question, right? Yes.
The latter.
Being human, right? Being human is a huge responsibility. Yes, maybe it's not a better or worse thing. It's that we're the ones who have the ability to show up and make, and co-create, and we have to show up and do it and not shirk our responsibility.
Absolutely. To whom much is given, much will be asked. Okay, Kathy, can you read that? I have my home on high.
Yes. I have my home on high. I meet every creature of the world with grace. I am the life and verdancy of good works. I am the yoke of all virtue. I am delight and illumination of love of God, the form of all seeking for him. All that God wills, I will. With wings of good intention, I fly the dome of the sky to accomplish the will of God in all. And so I climb ever higher to where I see God's doings face to face. Now I seek no more, desire no more, wish no more but what is holy. Thus I am in every respect of a heavenly nature.
Yeah, apparently she wrote this near the end of her life, like 70 or so. Right? She's describing her best self to us. Okay. All right. Anything else? Who's been so quiet and wanted to say something? Paulina, please. Yeah.
Oh, I've said a lot already, but
that's okay. You're on a roll.
I missed the first whole hour, I think. So I have to make up for it. But the one that Kathy just read really speaks to me because I have an ongoing question about the place of free will. In fact, I've had this ongoing argument with my rabbi about it. So I like what she says because it's if you can reach that point where your own will is so aligned, you're so much become a channel, then you will do what God wills and there's no conflict. And that really speaks to me. That kind of resolves the question of, do we have free agency? Yes, we have free agency. Moment by moment is how I see it, in moment to moment choices, which then become acted upon in the world. So then everything has to be, we have to face consequences. But I love the way she describes it, that let's see. Okay, the one, anyway, whatever Kathy just read. That was perfect. Thank you. That was great.
I climb ever higher to where I see God's doings face to face. Now I seek no more, desire no more, wish no more, but what is holy. Thus I am in every respect of a heavenly nature. I see it as developmental though. We gain in free will as we spiritually grow, as we morally grow. You can have more free will as you develop through the lifespan, as you are co-creative, with other people, to use her lovely word, co-creativity.
But this seems to, Harold, it goes with all like Kathy's her interfaith, in that all the religions are basically have the same core values and the same philosophies. Like it's the minutia that's different. It's like the Baha'i marriage vow is, we will all verily abide by the will of God. It's not love, honor, and obey. It's we will abide by the will of God. So, it's actually quite beautiful, really. So anyway,
that's a high motivation.
Yes. I know. So Hildegard actually figured it out 800 years ago.
Looks this way to me. Okay, friends, we went over time a little bit, but a few weeks from now, we have Julian of Norwich. She's a real special surprise too. Oh my goodness. And I think some of you may have already heard about her, right? Because she shows up in standard mysticism classes that include women. And she, you know, her book was the first full book written by a woman in the English language, as far as we know, right? In the English language, right? Hildegard is German. Okay, we're jumping ahead a few centuries in November 10th. Yeah, so anything else for the good of the order, Kathy? No problems. Okay, sorry to keep you late. It's 8:33.
That was wonderful. Thank you so much.
Yeah, that was great.
That was
Well
great.
done, Harold.
Thank
Thank you.
Harold, could I just ask you a personal question about when you say you went to seminary, did you go to be a Unitarian minister? Sorry, I didn't want to keep it. I just
Oh, you
wanted.
frozen. I didn't hear this.
Oh, did you want to
Yeah, I
be
was
a
a
Unitarian?
Unitarian minister right out of.
Right,
Yeah,
okay.
You wouldn't believe how young I was in the seminary. I graduated from seminary.
Losing you.
Yeah, I guess it's
Just
gone
a little
funny.
too
Oh,
young. Who would want to listen to me at age 24? So I had. Anyway, good night, people. Good night.
good night.
Right, thank you.
Thanks, Harold. Right
Thank
on.
you.
Good night.
Bye.
Bye.